All right, so this is going to be a review of Blue Beetle. As the newest superhero movie, newest DC movie. I heard somewhere that the movie's not going to be part of the DCU, but the character will be. Maybe I'm wrong on that though, but whatever. It's really messy. I can't wait for it to just be like, hey, this is the DCU, and we're moving forward from there. But as of right now, we still got this mess going on. But it's directed by Angel Manuel Soto, and in this, the main character, Jaime Reyes, played by Zolo Maridueña. I probably messed that up. I'm probably gonna mess a few names up here, so that's my bad. But he comes back after college to be with his family and all that, and he finds out that they're struggling financially. They're eventually going to lose the house because the landlord tripled the rent, and they already lost the shop. So he's gonna take on a job with his sister to clean up this really nice place that's owned by the villain in this, Victoria Cord, played by Susan Sarandon. She owns the evil corporation. This, I think it's just called Cord. He ends up getting into it with her because she's having issues with her niece, the love interest in this, Jenny Cord, played by Bruna Marquezine. I guess that's how you say it. I probably messed that name up too. And because they end up, him and his sister end up getting fired because of that, she's like, you know what, I'll give you my number. You can text me and come down, and I'll see if I can get you guys a new job. So he shows up there in a suit and all that, and she's running away because she's just stolen the scarab, which is the thing that gives the Jaime the Blue Beetle powers, turns him into the Blue Beetle in this. She says, go run away and all that, but it ends up getting on to him, and they have like a symbiotic relationship going after that. Like he can't actually get it off and all that. But Susan Sarandon's character, Victoria, still really wants to get it back, so they have to, he has to get used to it while also dealing with her. I was kind of back and forth on this movie, and I was back and forth between two ratings. We'll talk about that. From what I heard, it's not really making that much money in the box office, and I can see why. The main word in my head, I can't get it out, is generic, right? I saw the trailer, I thought that looked generic. I saw the movie, and it's not as generic as I thought it was going to be. It's got some good elements to it that we'll talk about in a second, but it turned out to be still kind of generic when it comes to the overall storytelling. But we'll talk about the negatives in a second. Positives, I think the main character, Jaime, and the family and the performances of the actors in those roles are really good. I like their back and forth. I like their dynamic, right? They have this real family unit and stuff like that. It kind of reminded me of the Shazam movies, mainly that first one, where like everything around it is just kind of not all that interesting to me, but the family elements of it do elevate it, and I do like that. They don't shy away from involving their race in certain parts of it, them being Mexican and things like that. At points, it goes a little far, especially with George Lopez. Gets a little stereotypical with his horn, and there's a point where somebody like, oh well, the scarab is an alien. He's like, I don't like that word and stuff like that. It's a bit much, right? And some of the family elements, especially towards the end, can get a bit cheesy. But I think that elevated this movie. I think every scene with the family interacting are some of the best scenes in this movie. And there's cool things you can do with his powers. The effects are good. The movie has, I think, good direction, and it has its own style that keeps it from being fully, completely generic. I like the climax of the movie, too. Involving the family in that is what elevated it, to be honest. That being said, like I said, generic, right? You got a corporation, an evil corporation that's trying to do whatever the fuck. I'm actually not even sure exactly what they're trying to do. They want to protect their assets abroad. It's like, okay, is that all? You're creating all these robots and doing all this with this scarab and trying to kill people and stuff like that. It's another thing. It's a corporation that has its private military or militia or whatever that's just able to do whatever the fuck. Off the top of my head, you had that with Venom, with Carlton Drake, I think that was his name, Riz Ahmed. You have that in Spider-Man Miles Morales, the video game. You have that in a lot of superhero stuff where, like, if a corporation is big enough, they can just do whatever. Like, they can be killing people in the streets and whatever. I know corporations can be bad, but this is specifically a superhero thing. So you have that going on. Susan Sarandon's character in this is completely one-dimensional. She's just the villain. I mean, that's it. She doesn't really get much development other than that. I'm not sure what she's trying to do, like I said. There's a villain underneath her that's pretty one-dimensional. He's there to fight Blue Beetle because he has these attachments and things, so he's able to fight Blue Beetle, like actually fight him, whereas everybody else is just kind of getting thrown aside and beaten by him. These thugs with guns because he's bulletproof. And that character turns out to be way more interesting by the end because there's like kind of a montage of his backstory. And that, if they'd have made that more of a thing throughout the movie, that could have made me actually care for that character and make me feel a little bit conflicted whenever him and Blue Beetle would go at it. But they didn't do that. They saved that to the end. So it kind of, it hurts the character overall because I didn't care about him at all up to that point. By that time, it's too little too late. Also, there's a lot of heavy exposition, especially like there's a scene with that guy, the guy that's underneath Susan Sarandon's character, the villain, the main villain. There's a point where she's explaining who he is and all that, and it's one of those scenes where she's just rattling down. He was in this place, in this place. He had a tour in this place, in this place, and it's super heavy-handed. A lot of this is super heavy-handed exposition. The love interest in this Jenny Cord. It feels like she's mainly the love interest just because, hey, she's attractive. It's like, hey, whatever. I guess they'll end up together, but they don't really have much chemistry. She's mainly there to give exposition because she's the person on the inside in the corporation that knows everything that's going on. Her dad is really important to the story, and there's some reveals there that she has to explain. But that's it. And with the movie being so heavy with exposition, a lot of it still feels underdeveloped. Like I said, I don't really understand the villain's plan completely. The family, that was a perfect example. The family is struggling financially. The family, they're going to lose their house and all this other stuff. And, they're really struggling. After a certain point, you could forget about that. The landlord doesn't come around to put up an eviction sign, or, they don't come home at one point in the movie and all their stuff is outside, right? It's not a real plot point, right? It feels like it's just there to lead him into that building so he can end up getting the scarab and we can go from there. My favorite superhero, Peter Parker, right? Peter Parker, Spider-Man. I have to establish that now because there's so many now, which I don't like. Whenever he's struggling in any aspect of his life, his relationships, school, stuff like that, with being Spider-Man, that's a huge part of his character. You feel that, right? Like they make it a point, like a point, and they really develop it. But especially financially, right? Like even the Sam Raimi movies, he's living in that shitty ass apartment and his landlord is constantly like, give me rent, and giving him shit, right? Or even the video game, there's a whole mission where you have to go pretty much dumpster dive because Peter couldn't pay his rent, so his landlord threw his shit in the trash, right? Like, do something with that if you're going to bring it up, especially if you make it such a big point of development for the characters in the beginning. That's how I get to know them and, try to get invested in them, which I still did, but do something with that then. But so much of this is 2 hours long, and this much of this movie should not feel underdeveloped with it being this long. It shouldn't, right? At the end of the day, you have really good stuff with the family and their dynamic, and they're funny together, and I'm invested in them. There's some emotional stuff that works with them too, some of it a bit cheesy, but it mostly works and elevates the overall movie because of that. But outside of that, it still feels just kind of hollow and empty and just kind of, I don't know, it's just another superhero movie other than that. So, that's why I was back and forth on ratings. I'm actually going to end up giving this a positive review. I'm going to end up giving it a good enough, but it was real close to a rental. Really involving the family in the climax of the movie and actually, getting them involved and everything. Because other than that, I didn't really care what Susan Sarandon and the other guy were trying to do and all that. Really involving them and having fun with it. And the grandma has this like weird like chain gun thing or whatever, and she has this secret past that's kind of funny. That's what like kind of pushed me over to being like, you know what, this is still pretty enjoyable even with the issues. But anyway, that is Blue Beetle, right? Yeah, largely pretty generic, but it's enjoyable enough. It's okay. Yeah, so good enough. Anyway, that's it. We're done.